Hello, everybody, and welcome to another conversation in our series on seeking harmony. Today, we are looking at some topics that have, over the past week, had a bit of potential to break the internet. And I think the biggest one that stands out to me is just the significant racial discourse related to a Black actress being cast in the role of Ariel from The Little Mermaid in the lead role. So yeah, that's been quite a topical thing over the last week or so. And also just to note that one of the things that stood out to me was that the release of the movie trailer actually resulted in 1.5 million dislikes, and Disney opting to turn off the like counter on the movie trailer. So I feel like it had probably been quite a significant storm. And for all intents and purposes, to me, it sounds like a little bit of a storm in a teacup. But at the same time, we do need to be cognizant of the fact that there will probably be people that will always have a counter argument to change and what that change actually means. And so we're seeing a lot of stories in the media this week in relation to change, and not only just change, but in the two sides of the change coin. So both for and against change. So yeah, I'm going to open it up to the team and see how they felt about the significant storm brewing in a teacup.
Well, first of all, like 1 billion dislikes? Is that even possible?
1.5 million. No, 1.5 million.
Okay. Million. Okay. I heard billion. I was like, what the what the hell?
that would be an interesting thing, wouldn't it? Because I don't think 1.1 billion people even bothered to pay attention to the internet.
Oh, well, yeah. Oh, well, I agree about the fact that it's a storm in a teacup, and at the same time, it's a big thing. Because it speaks to something, definitely speaks to something deeper. And yeah, basically, like for those who haven't heard about this, a movie trailer for a live action, the Little Mermaid film was like released, and Halle Bailey, who's a Black singer and actress, was casted for this movie for like a few years now. Like, so people knew, but I think having the movie trailer actually here made it real for people, and it was very touching to see like the little girls that were like smiling at being represented, like she's like me and she's on TV, she's Black and everything. But it quickly got taken away by, well, that sort of shitstorm of people saying like being outraged about this. And I really don't understand why. It got to a point where like I saw a Danish historian of religions trying to explain why the mermaid being Black is not something that is you know, out of this culture, like cultural appropriation, because like the Little Mermaid is Danish, because like religions of like African countries and European countries cross and everything. It got so far that he had to like do all this explanation about mythology, basically, to try and make people understand that it's not, you know, and it's not that big of a deal. And also it's the fact that it's a fictional character, first of all, and a lot of people were also outraged back at it because like many people in history like actual history and in movies have been whitewashed and deprived of their like original culture. And the Little Mermaid cannot even be considered as one culture, because if you see the cartoon, like the crab is Caribbean, like the girl is Danish. The prince is from Earth, she's from the sea. Like it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, it's definitely still a bit of an internet shitstorm, and I think it speaks to something deeper, and the racial divergence, I guess, that we've been experiencing between Black and white people for a long, long time, and that we need to address, because obviously this is ridiculous, but it's still here, Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting about the Danish historian who was talking about how, like, oh, this is actually plausible and justified because, African religions and European Christianity or paganism, I don't even know, were like, mixing together and interacting. Like, I feel like that's fine and interesting to do, but it's not necessary. And I feel like the rationalization can be interesting, or maybe I think it's very rare that actually changes someone's mind or actually helps them, because the real issue, if someone has a thing about this, an upset, is that it's like an emotional thing, and it's not something that you'll easily explain away, or someone be like, oh yeah, I get it, that sounds legit. But yeah, I think it's just something that has to be just felt, and healed through and experienced, for everyone. And yeah, but I think it's important not to focus too much on all the shitstorm, though, because the significance of it and the beauty of it, and like you said, little girls who see themselves represented, that counts, so much more than any of the reaction. So even though it's part of the overall story. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Granville.
No, you go ahead. It's cool.
I was just gonna say that it really speaks to, or it shows. Well, first of all, I think it's amazing, and I think it's incredible, and I think minorities need more of this. Need more representation. Like kids and adults do need to see themselves represented. And like for me as a trans person, I love seeing when trans people are represented in movies, and it is really fucking important to see that. And I think it's the same thing here. But I feel like this speaks to a really deep core wound, that there's still this separation and segregation that's here. And before like all of this craziness started happening, like with the police and stuff, I feel like my understanding was like, oh, that's over now, segregation, all that's done, it's fine, it's good, we're good. We are not good. We're not good.
Yeah.
And I think it really speaks to that, and it's just needs to be healed. There's just a huge call for love in this space.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that, because I think one of the things that stood out for me was, especially with what Yoreen was sharing around, little Black girls being really excited about, oh, she's like me. And now you're also sharing that representation still counts. And the optics still matter. And we need to be cognizant of the fact that diversity needs to not only be spoken about. So diversity, belonging, inclusion, transformation are not just boardroom topics. They're not just summit topics. They're not just general council topics. They are real human topics that impact how people experience their belongingness and their safety and their security and their just general existence on this planet. And so I feel like, yes, it was very tongue-in-cheek of me to say that it's a storm in a teacup, but the implication of that storm in a teacup is still, as you said, that there's still this discrimination. There's still this almost puritanical view of life that wants things to remain as they are. And then, like it just having historians and archaeologists and those type of people getting involved in an argument to debunk myths about the skin color of mermaids just almost what makes you wonder what the hell is happening in the world. And I did have a good laugh because I read an opinion piece from a writer from CNN, and he literally goes into all these various claims that The Little Mermaid was a story written by Hans Christian Andersen, and so by rights it is a European story, and European people are generally white. And then there's this historical account of Mer people in various cultural stories across every single continent in the world, and just debunking that actually the existence of Mer people in folklore is not unique to a specific culture, and therefore it cannot be specific to a particular skin color. But also, let's remember, the Little Mermaid isn't real, and this is how he ends each argument. And there are like 7 points, and it's just like, I had a good laugh because I think sometimes we get tied up in the narrative so much that we forget what the core message is and what the core healing is. And so it's important for us to always go back to the core. And what is this showing us? This is showing us that we still have a ways to go in just general acceptance. And not even just general acceptance, but just general permission to allow people to exist as they are.
I have to agree with what she said and what Sage said about that. I think we as humans has a tendency to get carried away into logicking our way through everything. And I think the work that we're learning here and also trying to teach to others is to kind of, let go of the story from time to time and go directly into the feelings, which is exactly what the mirror exercise is. Not to say that it wasn't interesting to have a Danish historian say that, like he said like really interesting things, like some deities are like represented our mothers and are represented as mermaids, and so there are historically in legends white and black mermaids everywhere in the world. And even if the Little Mermaid was in Danish waters, his wife and kids are French Caribbean, yay. And so still in Danish waters, it would be a good story, All of that is very sensible. And I know sometimes people think like we have to like harden the facts to kind of confront the bullshit. But I think what we're learning is that, you know, trying to confront the bullshit with logic doesn't get us anywhere, because you can't try to reason with ego. And this is the core of it. Like, this discussion wouldn't be made if people didn't believe in the power of ego. And so we have to make this new choice here of like really letting go of the story, and not only of the story, but of ego. Because when you let go of that, we all come to the same conclusion that it doesn't make any sense. It isn't even relevant. So we don't have to let our energy go into this, you know, because this is more exhausting than anything, you know. And it takes from the joy of seeing these little kids having a grand time watching someone on TV that is the same as them, you know.
Exactly. And, you know, it's like something else that stands out for me is that the opposite side of this whole trolling adventure would have been a celebration that the world is much more reflective of the multitudes of people that make it up. And yet we are stuck in a discourse of debunking crap.
Yeah, and why aren't we debunking Audrey Hepburn playing an Egyptian woman, or Brad Pitt playing a Japanese man, or Emma Stone playing a Hawaiian Pacific Islander woman, you know, all of that, which are true, actual true stories and facts that you're trying to represent in cinema. And maybe, you know, the cinema in Hollywood is representative of the people that want to see it. Maybe it's not. I guess Wakanda and like Black Panther have kind of like demolished that establishment of like, oh, it's representative of what people want to see. But the fact remains that there are still a lot of whitewashing movies out there. And as much as we'd like to say it's not a problem, it actually is. And this is a real problem. So again, like, it's deterring from the joy of these little kids having like this person that resembles them, and it's deterring from the true things that we have to look at. And I feel like much less heavy talking about that, because it's an actual problem that we have to go into to feel our feelings and feel better, than talk about all the arguments of the planet about the Black Little Mermaid, because yeah, it does feel heavy in my heart now that I compare the two feelings, because I know that I'm just losing my energy trying to talk about this, you know. Yeah, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but yeah.
I think something that we need to probably take into account, and maybe just surface an awareness, is we have had this conversation around the black trope in the media, as the villain, as the Jezebel, as all of those kind of characters. And we're seeing, with shifts like an African-American actress being cast in the role of Ariel, we're seeing a break in those tropes. We're seeing a break in that, for lack of a better word, bullshit. We are literally, we're seeing the counter to those tropes of the angry black woman and all of those kind of things. And I think that is what's shaking people at the core. It's shaking people that their beliefs, their fundamentally held, probably very incorrect beliefs, fueled by images in the media and other generalizations, all of those things are starting to be challenged when we see the strong Black woman in a movie running a company, as opposed to something like Scandal, where she was seen to be sleeping her way to the top with the president, kind of thing. So it's breaking these misperceptions, and I think that is really what is shaking people at the core. It's shaking their fundamental belief systems and causing them to have to reevaluate it. And so we generally find that the people who avoid that reevaluation are generally the bigger, harder trolls.
And I think we mustn't forget that when love wins, ego gets loud, like really
Exactly.
loud. So it makes noise to kind of think, because it's scared to be forgotten. So maybe there's a little bit of that too.
Yep, and it serves to be a distraction. It distracts from the win. It distracts from awareness that love is winning in this place, in this space.
I think we need to just keep shaking it up, and people can be loud, but who cares?
Yeah.
Because we're making progress, I think it's great.
Yeah, I agree. So yes, over to all of you. What would be the next best topic to move on to?
Can we talk about like the Republican nonsense now?
Yeah, it's kind of, yes, it's kind of funny. It's a fun topic.
Can you update us on that? Yeah.
There's two sides to it. One is, it is funny in that it is crazy and absurd. On the other hand, it's kind of serious. I think that, well, perhaps in explaining it, that would be more clear. But so basically, what's been going on is that so in Texas, there have been like a lot of immigrants coming in. I learned that there are just as many refugees, Venezuelan refugees, right now as there are Ukrainian refugees. Like Venezuela is literally producing just as many refugees as Ukraine right now. Because I don't know. Honestly, I had been unaware of that. But so in the most cases, these are like immigrants from Venezuela who have come and crossed through 10 or so countries and gone up into Texas. And, the Texas government rolled out a program where they could get a free bus and in some cases a flight up to certain places. And, in the Northeast. And the shtick is that the bus would drop the immigrants off right in front of Kamala Harris's house in Washington, D.C., the vice president of the U.S., or the plane would drop them off at Martha's Vineyard, which is like a vacation spot for like the ultra rich or the political elite in Massachusetts, and so not a place where you would typically have like a plane full of immigrants from Venezuela touching down, who came with nothing. And now they're here in this resort island which is definitely not going to discourage immigration to the US. Let's say that. That was their plan in Texas, and also to New York as well, which New York already has an overburdened social service system and homeless shelters and everything, right? So this is all happening, and in some cases, people are, not in a good state, like medically and definitely emotionally, from the journey, the traumatic journey of fleeing Venezuela or whatever country, going through these places, being extorted by armed, paramilitary people for money, and all of this, seeing all this death is along the route. But the idea is that the idea of the government in Texas and also Florida was to kind of be like, Washington and the liberal politicians are not tightening border security, whatever. So we're just going to, as a protest, we're just going to take the immigrants and send them to those places, basically. The liberal states, cities in the Northeast. Yeah, so that's what's happening. To me, I feel like it's like a lot of, it's a bit of a show, it's a bit of a stunt. It's not something to be angry about or all outraged, because the Democrats, some people are kind of like playing into the whole, it was intended to provoke anger, it was intended to provoke people, and all of that. And I think that bait shouldn't be taken, and we should just know that, just not give into that BS. But yes, that's basically what is happening. This is the story. Yes. So what do you guys think about this?
All right.
I feel it's a very American story. It's like, I don't know, has anything like this happened in France or South Africa to your knowledge?
It's a lot. Like, who would send people to? Okay, first of all, yes, it's ridiculous and
Yeah.
shouldn't be taken seriously. But also, I just can't help but think about all these human lives that are gonna get not better but worse because they've been displaced in an area where they can't get the support and help that they need. And I don't know why that's why the Democrats were outraged. But I still can't forget about these human lives. That, like, what do you do in a resort town? Like, what now with like overpriced everything and even more difficult access to basically everything because you don't have money. It would be a bit of a struggle for them,
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's interesting. It's like there's a lack of seeing, the lack of compassion there. Like there's not, I mean, some people were happy to take like a free bus ride up to the Northeast, maybe some people, they had family there, they had heard that it would be good for them or something, so that's fine, but in other cases, people didn't know what they were doing, where they were going, and they're going to places where people aren't always equipped to even help them. But people who are there, like for example in Martha's Vineyard, like some people, like local church volunteers, came and gave them basic necessities and stuff like that, the immigrants who would come there, so out of compassion for them. And so I don't know, it's just interesting. It's very, it's very theatrical, and
it is.
I don't know.
Yeah, it is theatrical, and but waving the carrot like that at people, for their lives, I can't help but think that, the intention was always wrong, but like it's way wrong, I feel, to do that. So yeah, I can't help but like share the gravity of like the human lives behind that. But as of politics, yeah, of course it's ridiculous. Yeah. So yeah. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm trying to contain the laughter because like the level of ridiculousness sounds a bit like it's out of a kid's comedy, kind of cartoon comedy, and to then consider that these decisions are being made by elected politicians or their representatives makes it even worse. And then, as you said, the flip side of it is just the sheer inhumanity of it all. That these people have had their lives displaced significantly. And now we're using them as pawns to force a decision in our favor, makes it even more atrocious. So yeah, like, I'm kind of caught between it's so freaking funny and it's not funny at all. And I'm not certain what to make of that yet.
Yeah, it's one of those things.
I feel like it's absolutely ridiculous, and it's just like, really, you dropped them off in her front yard? Are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah.
come on.
When you say it like that, it sounds even more ridiculous.
That's literally what happened. They dropped these people off in our vice president's front yard. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Oh my god. But it's so I feel like the core of it, or like the truth of it, is what is really going on here is that there's a crisis. There's an immigration crisis, and there needs to be a solution. And instead of finding a solution, they're weaponizing these people for their own political gains. And it's like, what the hell? And like, there just needs to be a solution. Like, what is the solution to this? Or what is the core wound, and what is the solution,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And just the sheer ridiculousness of the vice president's front yard. Why not the president's front yard?
Well, that would just be in front of the White House.
Well,
because that's less insulting, because the White House has like a big fence around it. The vice president has like, I think, a more humble residence in Washington, D.C. for when she's the vice president, because she's from California. So yeah.
But do you know how violating it is at the same time to have done that to her? And
exactly.
like they can counter argue that, oh my god, migrants come to our backyards every day, but like, I feel like it's the same kind of counter arguments and ridiculousness that you were seeing with the Black Little Mermaid, because it's actually not the case. And openly violating someone's safety and privacy like that, it doesn't, obviously she has security, but it's not, all of it is so inhuman when you think about it deeper. And
yeah,
I'm just like, I'm the same as Grendel. I'm just abashed about that, and kind of caught in between. I don't know how to react, but I think it depends what you're laughing at, laughing at guess. The agenda of trying to shake the nation about like the migrants crisis, definitely not working out. Definitely making them look like they care about the migrants crisis, which they do not. And or maybe they do, but it's like, yeah, it's just not the right way, you know.
I have a very different feeling about this. And when I put it in relation to the fact that the vice president is a female, it sounds a bit like gender-based violence, which really irks me. Then to use these people in that way, I'm not laughing at anything other than the stupidity of the thought process of supposedly elected, educated people. I'm literally, and I know it's probably not the best stance to have, but I am literally laughing at the sheer stupidity of it all. And again, it goes back to the same argument. You cannot argue with ego in this space. But you can just see how ridiculously small-minded actions like that are, because it solves no real problem. It doesn't drive an agenda that says, even let's table them. It just says, oh, literally it says, I have something that I don't want. And since you seem to be in support of this thing, you take it and you deal with it. It's really, really obnoxious.
Yes, definitely. I think gosh, I can't remember what I was gonna say. Yes, and I feel like it does seem like that is true. It does seem like it feels like the attempt at violence, like gender-based violence. And I think also it might be a racial thing as well, since Kamala Harris is Black, you know, and South Asian as well. And, you know, and Joe Biden is white. So there's kind of more of like it was pointed more at Kamala Harris for that reason, I believe. I mean, that's what I would surmise, because none of this is like accidental.
Yeah, but I would too, like, you know, sorry, I just don't think energetically, I just don't think people would have done that to Mitt Romney, you know. I just don't see that, for example. I'm just saying. But
not have done that too.
Mitt Romney.
Exactly. But this is exactly my fundamental issue with it. Is that it ticks so many isms boxes. You cannot misconstrue the total lack of respect for the office of the vice president purely based on the fact that she is a female.
Yeah, Sage, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just, it kind of, it feels like there's just, yeah, I think it's also kind of like, I feel like this is also part of a trend in the US that has been cropping up on the right wing of being like resorting to tactics that aren't really democratic. It's not really, because that's not really supportive of democracy to do such a thing. It can be done, but the idea is that, you know, or it's kind of like there's a federal government and then there are states, and the states are supposed to be united and in cooperation because they're part of the same country. And, that's supposed to be it. And if there's a dispute, the dispute's supposed to be resolved in the court system between states. So there's been this kind of energy of like defiance, desperation, and almost just a desire to forcefully, try to override democracy in the case of those who have views that are kind of being eroded with the times. You know what I mean? Because the thing about it is that, the US is changing. And for some people, the deep-seated feelings of antipathy or rejection, or just not seeing the humanity of people, like immigrants, or not believing that a woman has authority as the vice president or something like that, these antipathies are being roused, and people are responding by acting out in ways that are forceful or violent or disrespectful or, not democratic. And I feel like it's kind of an act of force or like desperation, because there's a feeling of like, we're losing this battle. The US is changing. It's no longer this ideal of white male patriarchy that the country used to hold much more, and that some people are still holding. So there's a reaction against it. I think that's what it is, But yeah, I think it's just a matter of people, accepting themselves and claiming their power as well, and healing the deep disconnection within the self, because I feel like that's what's being triggered by people who are uncomfortable, with immigration and diversity. I think like in the US that's seen, because I feel like a lot of people like aren't even aware that there is like a huge immigration crisis, like, or that there is a huge refugee crisis from Venezuela or something in particular, because I feel like there's kind of like there's a bit of a divide there, and there's a cutoff there, and some people feel that their political constituents would like it, would respond well by treating these people as pawns and not as people, because there's such a feeling of divide and separation. And for others, it's like obvious that isn't the case, and that these people are, they've been through trauma and they are human as well, and that they shouldn't be treated in such a way, and they deserve care and compassion in this scenario. So there's just like there's a gap there. Yeah, that's how I feel about it.
So here's an interesting question, and I think it's something that we maybe need to just explore for a little bit. What would be the unionist way under these circumstances?
Yeah.
Oh.
Treat everyone with dignity and humanely, first of all.
Yeah.
Yeah, act out of love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Sage pointed something very, very important about like having power, but feeling that you're powerless. I think we've explored politics so much that now we know, thanks to Jeff as well, that politics is a balance between parties. And you have, as an elected governor of a state, you have to expect that you have been given that power. And you are in this balance. Two sides of the same coins, debating to try to find the best way to govern the country, And going out of that balance, of that system that is here, and that is like actually good, made for you to exercise the power given to you. Going out of that to try something else, to try out of desperation or anger, or I don't know, is a complete disrespect of a power and a complete loss of the power that was given to you, probably divinely given to you, you know, to act as a spokesperson for your people. And so the truth is, like, as humans, what are we choosing? Because right now it feels like we're extremely divided and extremely, I say extremely, in the kinds of reaction that we are seeing about such topic and such, you know, extremely divided about our response. And it's like as if there's a clear, distinct choice about, like, okay, going all in with love or going all in not love. And this is quite, you know, there's a violence in that, like emotionally it's violent to witness that, you know. But yeah, I guess that's what it demonstrates. And also it demonstrates, like, how strong are we? Like, are we going to give up, or are we going to steal love and respond out of love in response to that, you know?
Yeah, and I think you raised something quite important, and I think there's still a core wound of very much battle energy. There's still this core wound of fighting, and I think that that internal war that people have with themselves, within themselves, is seeming to play out a lot more in the political and national sphere of relationships. So there's a very combative way of interacting with each other. That is probably one of the things that is going to require the greatest amount of healing. And it's something that kind of struck me just in the word debate, because debate to me always has the sense of countering. There's always the push and pull. There's always the need to one up somebody in that interaction. So there's a lot of requirement to even change the narrative to a much more conversational tone. Because when we're conversing, we're not likely to also be at loggerheads with each other. We might have counterpoint of views, but it's still conversing, which to me speaks to an energy of togetherness more than an energy of opposition.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel, and I think that, you know, with political expressions such as this that are more that feel more like violent, or let's say disrespectful, or whatever, forceful, I feel like the reason that is that way is because people don't feel like making clear and plain and what their problem is, or they don't feel comfortable voicing it in a in a vulnerable manner, you know, like it's doing it, you know what I mean, it's doing it in like this really hurtful manner, voicing the discomfort with the immigration, because inside it feels very uncomfortable, like this deep antipathy to, and you know what I mean, and these feelings of, you know, anger and hostility toward the people who are immigrating, it's, you know, I feel like the internalized, you know, whatever it is, like the shame or the guilt or the whatever, it gets thrown out like that. You know, it gets tossed out like that, rather than coming to the table and being like, hey, we're not comfortable with the demographics changing in our state. We don't want, you know, because, you know, to be like that and to be so open about it just feels out of the question, you know, and it's always in different terms than that. And it's never like, oh, you know, we don't have the resources, we don't have the job openings, you know, the last 3 job openings in the state of Texas just filled, you know, so we don't have, you know, space for anyone. It's never articulated like that, you know, it's not. And so I think there's a reason for that. And it means that it's something that has to be dealt with a loving boundary, you know, or, you know, with love and with, yeah, you know, introspection.
Yeah, and truth behind intentions. Because I think
Right.
that is what creates the bigger concern, is that the conversation and topics are so veiled because the true intentions are literally being hidden in various forms. And so we will see things play out in ways that we wouldn't have thought they would play out, all for the purpose of achieving an objective without being honest about the intentions behind that objective.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like I think the lesson in this is just not to get involved in the drama, don't play into the attack, don't fight back, but to also feel, just to feel sure of yourself within that, you know, this isn't right, this isn't love, this isn't how we treat people, you know, this is humanity here, you know, these are human beings that we are dealing with, and I won't be involved in the drama, but at the same time, I won't, you know, just sit back and let it happen without, you know, a boundary basically being placed, that kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've touched on a very important component, in that there's a component of choice for all of us. To be drawn into and distracted by the drama, or to remember that we are powerfully individual divine beings, and that our choices remain sovereign. And so one of the things that we probably that I would like to see, is just people standing in their personal power. Because also, what is it about a female vice president not owning her power that allows people to act in that way towards her? There's something at the core that requires healing, and I feel like that core is, yes, I am powerful, but I also need to believe in my own power, because there is no way that in this day and age, given everything that we know about ourselves as powerful individuals, that she was elected by accident into that significant of a role in this time in history. So collectively, there was a call for a change. Answering that call for the change meant she powerfully chose her power in order to step up into that role. But somehow there's a gap that says that power is not quite grounded. And it's literally about remembering that we create in our reality. And remembering that we are responsible for healing our reality so that it shifts.
Yeah.
You said it.
You said it. Yeah.
I kind of felt like that was like, okay, we did one of those. You
I was
remember?
gonna do that.
One of those in a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
we did.
so yeah, I feel like that's probably wraps it up unless you guys have any more comments on that. I don't know. Okay. Did you want to like briefly talk about India's historic shift in its relations with Russia?
I think we need to hold over those two for next week. We are literally almost on our hour. So I think it wouldn't do justice to even explore either one of those additional topics at this point. But I do believe that they are important to explore. So I would definitely like for us to take them through into next week.
Yeah.
Cool. So with our conversation today, I feel like we have reached a point of completion. I'm just checking in with everybody else. How are you feeling?
Yeah, it feels complete to me.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So thank you everybody for today's chat, and to everybody that's been following us, and to those of you that have not yet liked and subscribed to our Church of Union YouTube channel, we'd like to invite you to do so. You will find all our previous conversations and any other live conversations that have happened in the Unionism Spiritual Discussion Group on Facebook. And we look forward to seeing all of you again next week for another fun and exciting conversation in our Seeking Harmony series. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.